Hello dear viewers, I am George from Ireland. So this video is about the forthcoming American election. So there are under 90 days to go now until the moment of truth, and President Trump will face a reckoning with the American people for his grossly incompetent mishandling of the coronavirus crisis, of the economy, so many other issues, his pathological lying. And the staggering thing is that about 40% of the population still want to put their faith in Donald Trump. They'll cast their ballots in his favor, despite having been lied to countless times, despite him having failed them on so many fronts. You can follow his record over the trail of so many broken promises and failed policies. So the opinion polls put Joe Biden about 10% ahead. That's the polar polls, depending on which one you look at. Obviously, it fluctuates from day to day. Now, people say, well, there've been presidential candidates who had a 10% lead at this point in the electoral cycle, and that turned to dust by the first Tuesday in November. Well, there are rather few examples of that, particularly in more recent decades, as polling is becoming much more scientific and sophisticated. And remember last time, that Hillary Clinton had a significant lead, not as much as this, and not so close to Election Day, 4% lead on Election Day, which turned into a 2% lead in the popular vote. Obviously, that didn't get her through to the magic number, to 270 in the Electoral College. So there's a margin of error, of course, because an opinion poll is just that. It's not the actual election. Opinion polls don't pretend to be absolutely accurate. And they can only be absolutely correct if you ask every single registered voter, if every single registered voter answers you honestly, and nobody changes his or her mind by Election Day, and nobody dies before Election Day. So they said there's a 2% margin of error, and from the poll of polls to the actual result last time, it was at 2%, so at the limit of the margin of error. So no, I don't accept they were wrong, actually. They could have been even more accurate, and so they've striven to make them more accurate. In the midterms, it's worth remembering that the Democrats won the popular vote by 8 percentage points. So one would expect that in a presidential year, the Democrats would poll a little more strongly. Now remember, you cast one vote for the president, one for the governor of your state, if he or she is facing re-election, one for a senator sometimes, one for someone in the House of Representatives. There might be various state legislative elections at the same time. So you might vote for a Republican as president, but a Democrat as governor, but an independent to be in the House of Representatives, but a Green to be in the Senate, but a Republican to be your governor, and a Democrat to be in your state legislature. So you're not necessarily voting the ticket all the way across the board. I know in these times of hyper-partisanship, more people have a clear party alignment than heretofore. Anyway, so when he was asked by Chris Wallace about a fortnight ago if you lost the election, would he accept the outcome? And he wouldn't guarantee to do that, which again is flabbergasting and should provoke anxiety in all of us. No presidential candidate I've ever heard has ever said that in advance. He's getting his excuses in early because he expects to lose. And of course he has previous. Remember in 2016 he said that the Republican nomination was rigged. If it's rigged, withdraw. You obviously can't win if it's rigged. And if you do win, well then, it can't be rigged unless it's rigged by you. And then he said that the forthcoming presidential election, when he was standing against Mrs. Clinton, was also rigged. And again, were he to actually believe that, he ought to withdraw from the race rather than legitimize it with his presence. And then when he won, well, that clearly proved he was lying yet again. But Donald Trump, early in life, discovered that frequent and absolutely flagrant lying was a winning strategy from him again and again. One would have thought that having a reputation as being utterly mendacious might be a disadvantage in business, but apparently not. He's made billions, claims to have $10 billion, and that's another thing. Why, oh why, will he not release his tax return? There must be something so shameful in there that's why he tries might and main to keep it hidden. What is it that is so incredibly embarrassing for him? It must be excruciating to tell the public he's nothing like as rich as he said he was, that he's getting filthy money from some untrustworthy source or things like that. So postal votes, he's doing everything he can to negate public faith in postal votes, to spread this narrative that the whole thing is going to be full of fraudulent votes. So he's trying to discredit postal voting, which has been going on for decades. And He postal voted in Florida. If postal voting is so unacceptable, he wouldn't have done it. As he's done it, clearly he finds it acceptable. Oh, so it's one rule for me and another one for everyone else. I remember his press secretary saying, oh yeah, he's the president, it's different. It's not actually. He's got the same voting rights as everybody else. He can organise his timetable. He could fly to Florida to vote if he wanted to. Most presidents manage to vote in person. Wow, just despicable. Anyway, postal votes are needed more than ever because of coronavirus, which is killing so many people. Particularly ethnic minority people seem to be vulnerable to it. Is it because of the jobs they do more often face-to-face? But I've noticed this phenomenon around the world, in the United Kingdom. But or is it a genetic susceptibility? Perhaps it's both. Is there greater obesity amongst ethnic minorities in the United States? I don't know. Could be that. Because they say obesity raises your risk of this as well as cancer. I'm not sure what other factors influence how susceptible you are to falling victim to COVID-19. But maybe think, is there a method to his madness? Does he want coronavirus to just let rip? Because he calculates it will kill a lot more Hispanic and African-American people than it does whites. And amongst whites, he has something like a 60% advantage last time, a bit lower this time, something like 55%. Put it this way, if only whites were able to vote, and a lot of Trumpsters think only whites should be able to vote, then Trump would win. So he can't actually bring that about. I'm sure he bitterly regrets that, but he can help coronavirus spread to kill off as many ethnic minority people as possible. But perhaps I impute a bit too much logic and calculation to him, because he's someone who shoots from the lip. It's always the sort of visceral judgment. He believes in sort of charismatic leadership, a bit like Mussolini. He can smell the right decision to take. So he's so erratic. He makes policy on the hoof, really through a series of brain farts. He riffs on certain themes. Sometimes he's got his teleprompter, boasting he was so macho he didn't need it. Well, he frequently uses it, stumbles over the words, really mangles them. Such mispronunciations, so many malapropisms coming out of him. It'd make the Bush dyslexicon seem like a sonnet. So there is little constancy in any, if any, in Trump. He's notoriously impatient, irascible, impish, infantile. He has the concentration span of a mayfly. And it's just such a time that a terrible crisis like coronavirus gets a grip that you desperately need a president who is someone who is calm, can placidly, soberly digest briefings and documents and ponder the right decision to take and weigh out the pros and cons of each possible policy, things like that. Someone who's capable of ratiocination. But so he's saying he won't acknowledge the outcome of the election. Well, not if he doesn't like the outcome. Anyway, so coronavirus obviously raising unemployment because so many businesses can't operate. They've had one lockdown. It was lifted prematurely. It wasn't even a proper lockdown. And go into a second lockdown. Even more people are going to disobey that. And now I'm not sure anyone's even saying that it's a hoax even now. Remember, Trump said it's a hoax. It is just mind-blowing, nauseating. If I didn't know better, I thought, is he trying to do exactly the wrong thing every single time? That it doesn't exist, not to wear a mask, to use hydroxychloroquine, which is completely unproven to defeat coronavirus, which has bad side effects, to inject bleach into your lungs, and on and on and on. Is he trying to kill as many Americans as possible? Is the kind of health advice that Osama bin Laden would give to Americans. So, and Trump is incipiently senile. He's patently got pre-Alzheimer's. No, I'm not a doctor, all right? I don't need to be a physician to know what something which is when it's absolutely blatant, all right? I don't need to be a doctor to know what a sneeze is, or to recognize the sight of blood, or to know what defecation is, all right? There's some things which just are completely obvious to a layman. He's so forgetful. He lies all the time, even when this is provable, although that's par for the course for him. He misspeaks ever more. He's increasingly undignified. His mispronunciations are coming more often. So he's perspiring profusely, even when nobody else is, sweating like a swine in a slaughterhouse. Is he that anxious? And remember, he returned from some campaign event about a week ago with his cap off, with his tie off for the very first time, looking very dejected and defeatist. So he's jaded. He's yesterday's man. He's not been the solution that some people once cracked him up to be. So remember, 4 years ago, he was irrepressible. He was ubiquitous. He was a sort of like a fake tan Santa Claus, managing to be everywhere at once. He was always on TV. He was an indefatigable self-publicist for decades. I was about 10 years old, didn't take any interest in New York celebrities, but even back then I'd heard of him because he was always keen, to be there. Never miss a chance to be on television, as Gore Vidal once said. So this shameless showman is finally tiring of the game. Surely time to bow out. And people have speculated what would happen if he did, presumably move Mike Pence into the top slot. Now, Mike Pence doesn't lie as much. He hasn't got the scandalous private life. He's led an existence that's blamelessly bourgeois in its domesticity. However, I don't think he would galvanize the Republican base as Trump did and indeed does to some extent. Remember those Trump rallies, just electrified by his racist and Islamophobic screeds. And what's his name? Mike Pence just doesn't have the same magic. Try and find some vice presidential candidate to shake it up. So I think they wouldn't be on to a winner with him. I think it's probably for the Republican Party a chance to go big and go home. I believe they're going to lose. I think it's quite a high chance, about a 65% chance that they will lose. Okay, so notice I didn't say 100% chance. He could still pull it out of the bag if he keeps rising in the polls. He's been rising in the past couple of days. Something goes badly wrong for Joe Biden. Joe Biden collapses on stage, or I don't know what, or just drops dead. There's obviously a possibility Trump would drop dead. No one of that age. How old is he now? Is he 75? Who is obese, who takes no exercise, has to be driven in a golf cart to go more than 100 meters. No one of that age is completely healthy. Such people like that can go in the night. But anyway, so Trump has come out with his veritable efflorescence of lies, as usual. Say that, the election's trying to be influenced in favor of Joe Biden, or Joe Biden was involved in some terrible corruption scheme about Burisma, which Hunter Biden, his son, worked for in Ukraine, and trying to close the investigation. This is bull. Yes, Hunter Biden worked there in Ukraine, and the company he worked in was under investigation for 2 years before Hunter arrived there. Joe Biden was trying to get rid of a corrupt judge, and pro-Putin Ukrainian sources have released audios to try and support this narrative, and none of them are actually incriminating of Joe Biden. Anyway, so the coronavirus numbers, they're being massaged rather roughly, particularly in Florida, where for months they've been deliberately underreporting the death toll. So I think it's 165,000 Americans have died of coronavirus. The death toll is not slowing down. It's very low in the United Kingdom right now. Italy, some other countries got it very low. I was in Italy a couple of months ago. My last day in Italy, there were 3 coronavirus deaths that day. So per capita, the United States is doing very badly, certainly the top 10 countries, and Trump telling outright lies about America's record on coronavirus. Just endless, just on and on and on. Not half lies, not things which are out of context, just total, frank, complete lies. And yet there's some people who still believe him. Wow, I mean, he really has pushed the boundaries of credulity with this. He's just all over the shop on what truth is. He seems to have no concept of truth, just shameless about doing this kind of thing. So Trump is someone who's esurient for power, and he's driven by a number of lusts for wealth, for adulation, for sex, for attention. These are insatiable yearnings of his. I would imagine the libido is not as strong as it once was at his age, and being so very overweight. So his drives have never been repurposed as something constructive. Someone with this explosive energy could have done so much in sport or in real business, not just fraud, not just lying to people and being a front man, not just running a non-existent university, bait and switch. He's a con man. And people like Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz, remember 4 years ago, they denounced him, they called him out, they said what a scumbag and a charlatan he was. But, so many Republicans didn't listen. The ordinary Republicans, the Republican establishment knew a fraudster when they saw one. So it's always for him, it's not service, it's always self before service, or maybe it's sort of self-service, fingers in the till. Yeah, the US military has to say in my hotels. Mike Pence, when he goes to the Republican Party, has to say in my hotel, on the opposite side of the country from Dublin, not staying in the US Embassy, where every other American president, vice president would stay, if they're anywhere near Dublin. Wow, just shoveling money to himself. It gets worse. Melania Trump, if I've got this right, over the past 3 months, spent over $600,000 on hair treatment. $600,000. Okay, so how many $1,000 is that per day? And that's paid for by the taxpayer. Wow, it's nauseating. So what is this Republican attitude? Stand on your own 2 feet. Don't ask the government to pay for your healthcare. Pay for your own healthcare. You can't pay for it. That's your problem. You can just die. But the taxpayer should pay for a billionaire's wife to have her hair done. Wow. I mean, just yet again, words fail me. He plumbs the depths of immorality. How much lower can he go? You think of these people struggling on minimum wage, working 3 jobs. They still can't afford their medicine and they're dying in agony. And their tax money is going for that rich bitch to have her hair done. They are that miserly, so tight-fisted, they won't pay for their own hair care. Wow. It just really is sickening. So he craves publicity. He's always banging on about how rich he is. He never tires of harping on that theme. So what is so utterly shameful about what's in those tax returns? One day we will find out. The subpoenas have gone in. He's disregarded the subpoenas. The whole point of a subpoena is you have to do it. It's under threat of punishment. Under punishment subpoena, that's what it means. He's in breach of these. So he has blatantly broken the law for decades with impunity, assuming he's invincible. That may well be coming to an end. There's a Republican majority in the Senate as well as Congress. There's so many investigations could be opened into him. Presidents are sitting, don't get arrested. There's a statute of limitations. He might be having his collar felt on the 20th of January if Biden is inaugurated. So he has just been cataclysmic for the United States, gone round like a wrecking ball, vandalizing America's relationships with everybody else, bring the country into disrepute. So I suppose he's not as rich as he says. Did he get Russian funds? I mean, his sons have blurted it out. They got loads of money from Russians. Could be nothing wrong with getting money from Russians, fine. But we know that he's an outspoken admirer of Vladimir Putin. You know, when people pointed out to him that Vladimir Putin had journalists murdered, Trump said he is at least in charge of his country. So according to Trump, that's being in charge of your country is murder. That's laudable, Trump thinks. An avowed enemy of the free press. And notice how when Trump's under investigation that law enforcement are Nazis. Are we in Nazi Germany, he asks. But if law enforcement officers, if they murder unarmed black men for being black, that's absolutely fine in Trump's view. No nary a word should be sent against them. And sad to say, many Republicans seem to take the same view, putting around the complete lie that George Floyd died of drug overdose, rather than having his neck knelt on for 9 minutes. Witnessed by many people, admitted to by the officers who killed him. Well, the one officer who killed him, the others who stood idly by and did nothing to prevent murder being committed, right in front of their very eyes. So it's amazing that his tax returns had never been leaked. You thought some public-spirited person there might let it out, but no. So Trump is a scattergood. He's a ebullient, an exhibitionist, a show-off, a blowhard full of braggadocio. Anyway, so it seems to me that no stigma attaches to self-praise in the United States. I was brought up to believe that self-praise is no praise. There's quite a possibility Trump will die of coronavirus. Other people in his entourage have caught it. None of them have died. He could be ill. He could collapse on stage or something like that. As I say, there's a serious chance that would happen to Biden too. And yet Biden is not a superb candidate. But, you know, he was the best on offer. He got the nomination. There we go. Could scarcely be worse than Trump. Of course, Biden has his debilities and is not as mentally sharp as he once was. He's 77. What do you expect? But Trump could still bow out, could choose not to run. I don't see it myself and say, well, I just want to get back to business or whatever, because he might find that less humiliating than taking a drubbing in the polls. So, yeah, as I say, Biden could fall or stumble or something like that. He's saying very little, conserving his energy, low-risk strategy. So long as he does nothing foolish, if there's no mishap, he'll win. So play it safe. That is the stratagem. So far, appears to be paying dividends. His vice presidential pick is crucial. I'm astonished he hasn't announced her. Almost certainly is going to be at her yet. So, and then he would step down after one term. Another point to note is that no sitting vice president when running for the presidency has ever lost. Okay, that's not an iron law. They could lose in future, but based on precedent, is unlikely. So Chris Wallace offered to interview Joe Biden, and he declined. Now Eric Trump was fulminating about this. He said it was wrong of Joe Biden to say no. Well, Joe Biden's got a wiser electoral strategy than your dad. Think on that. Who's really smart? So Trump's really volatility, his volubility may be working against him. People finally fed up of his boorishness. Biden's quiescence seems to play to his advantage. What a marked contrast there is. Trump is so often noisome and noisy, full of glitz, glam, pizzazz, razzmatazz, ballyhoo, and bullshit, whereas Biden is purporting to be the complete opposite of all these things, and that is working to his advantage. You know, it's not in the bag yet. Things could still go wrong. I always thought Trump might try some desperate gamble at the last possible minute. What could be his new gambit? Bombing Iran or something like that. Another state of emergency. And if the results are close and some states don't register them, or a lot of ballots don't come in quite soon because of the United States Postal Service has to have social distancing, slowing things down, more postal votes than ever before, he would say these are too late, these can't be counted. He's already got his excuses in early to Republicans not to accept it, and would states register a Trump victory where there wasn't a Trump victory? There could be more faithless electors in the Electoral College, because remember, there are a number of electors for each state, and they're really just party activists, and they meet in Washington sometime after the actual polling day and carry out the physical action of voting. And you have to vote the way your state told you to. Many states have got criminal sanctions if you fail to do so. Not all do. There were a few faithless electors last time who went against what their state mandated them to do, but nevertheless, that is legally binding. The system, okay, wouldn't it be good to clear it up, to have it by popular vote, or to have it virtually? Our state has X number of electoral votes, and they just automatically go to whichever candidate our state voted for, and it's impossible to be a faithless elector, to do away with the archaic ritual of going to Washington, D.C. and voting in person, or something like that, so that the faithless electors couldn't make a difference. So far, they haven't swung the result ever, but they could do, especially if it's neck and neck. So there are all sorts of terrible scenarios being looked into, and he tries to stay on in office, and fortunately, the signs are the US military would be having none of that, would just physically remove him from the building. But a large minority of the country will be on his side, saying it's a coup d'etat, and they're trying to demonize BLM, saying, oh, they're Marxists and anarchists and rioters and blah, blah, blah. Several million people have been on BLM protests in the United States, at least several million. How many have been rioting? I think very, very few. Notably, in all these BLM protests, and then sometimes riots on the fringe, not a single person's been killed. Not one. I don't want anyone killed. I don't want any violence. Don't want any vandalism. None of that's acceptable. I condemn that by anyone, whether involved with BLM or not, who does that kind of thing. But the few acts of vandalism or even violence have been hugely blown out of proportion by the white supremacists who are trying to do anything to shift the spotlight off white supremacist violence and onto BLM as though they're the bad guys. And there's some people in BLM I disagree with. But anything not to engage with the gravamen of BLM's case, the salient point that all too often black people are killed by the police without lawful excuse. Anyway, that's my penny's worth. I really desperately hope Trump's going down, hoping against hope, not being too complacent, not gloating, that there is no room for that. You can't brag now. Do not count your chickens before you're hatched. I just plead with Americans to vote the right way. Is this a foreign influence campaign? Well, what do you think? We're allowed to have an opinion, to say what you think. What do you think about the politics of the Republic of Ireland or the United Kingdom? Tell me. So thank you so much for your donations, and I will mention you on air if you like in future, donors. And I desperately need donations to sustain this channel. So please donate on PayPal or Patreon. PayPal, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Callahan, that's CALLAGHAN. All small letters, georgecallahan79@gmail.com. Toodle pip.